You are live. Great. So, welcome, friends and family. My name is Kiara Lexi, and if you are watching this from the future and you don't know me, because kind of everybody who watches this right now already knows me, uh, I'm a writer who lives and writes in Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Normally, this channel is exclusively for me to whine about my week and about my writing to my friends and family, whose job it is to hold me accountable for my manuscript and for finishing that manuscript. This all started as an accountability thing. But today, I want to do something kind of special, I guess. It is the 1st of November, and today is the start of NaNoWriMo, which stands for National Novel Writing Month. Nikki is here. Nikki says you're an hour early. No, wait, DST on Trini. Yes, it is 4 o'clock Trini time. So it is, I guess, maybe early for you, but it's the same time for me. Yes, so I decided that since it's NaNoWriMo and since we have a lot of new writers for NaNoWriMo every year who, kind of try to give it their first go at finishing a complete manuscript, I would do a long-ish cast on just kind of writing terminology. And I decided to do this because it took me a long time to learn all of these different terms and what they mean and what they stood for or what they did or didn't, indicate. Um, and I don't want everybody to have to do that. And I have seen more than once people talk about some of these terms in ways that exclude others who are not yet familiar with the terms. And I learned it over time. I learned it because I was able to take some classes and do professional development for my writing and for editing in some cases. And yeah, not everybody has access to those things, but YouTube is free. At least it is right now. So hopefully somebody will come across this and find this very useful. But also, I do have some friends who are interested in writing in the future or who have just started writing in a serious way or like with the goal to finish their book. That's all I mean by serious, or to finish whatever story they're written, whether it's short story or what. And some of them are also not familiar with these terms. In fact, I have terms in this list, and oh my god, it's a list. It's a real long list, Olia. Like, geez and ages. But we'll get through as much of it as we can. I have met like people who've been writing for years who didn't have yet to come across some of these terms, and like in the critiquing process or in the editing process, both of which I will talk about, this was new to them, and it was something that could have helped these friends of mine or these other writers that I knew, way earlier in their journey. So I'm doing this list today with the hopes of helping my friends who are not writers to understand what all of these things I talk about are and mean, as well as hopefully to help people in future who are seeking to start their writing journey to understand what these things are and how they might be used. I will be talking about some terms that we already know very well and that we already understand pretty easily. And so you might hear some of these things and you go, oh, psh, everybody knows what that is, Kia. Why are you talking about it? Because somebody out there doesn't know. Somebody out there doesn't know what this thing means. And so here I am. I think that I should probably just get started instead of continuing to blather because it's a long list. I've got 35 terms on here, and as you can see, I've got like a lot of notes on some of them. Okay, here we go, you guys. The first thing that I want to talk about is genre. Some people don't pronounce it genre. It's G-E-N-R-E. I've always pronounced it that way. If you don't pronounce it that way, I think that that's fine. I don't know what the real way to pronounce it is if that's not what it is. So, And not everybody quite understands what a genre is. I have heard of and seen people confuse genre with age category, and I will talk about age category. So genre is a word that usually it just kind of broadly defines the style and the setting of your book, and sometimes what some of the major plot points and structures that we're looking at are intended to be, right? For example, romance, right? Romance is usually a story with at least two main characters. Who will meet at the beginning of the book, and over the course of the book they will fall in love. And a romance by definition has a happily ever after, so there is always a happily ever after ending. If there's no happily ever after, it's not considered a romance. It might be considered a tragedy or a fantasy or whatever else it might fit into, but it's not romance if there's no happily ever after. um Fantasy usually has things like, magic and stuff. Science fiction is something that looks beyond where humans are today and, incorporates elements that are scientifically plausible but not yet real. So they're still fiction. Let's see. Subgenres are ways to further categorize the content of your book into sort of more specific themes, settings, and characteristics. So, for example, using romance, I'm probably going to use romance as an example often because it's just very easy to use the romance genre as an example of so many of these, probably because it's such a popular genre. So, subgenres of romance might be paranormal romance, where paranormal romance is a romance book that has paranormal elements, usually like werewolves, vampires, witches, wizards, magic, so on and so on. And these things are usually set in, or these events are usually set in fairly modern day. I don't think I've heard of paranormal romance being in a historical setting, though I guess it can be. But I wouldn't be the expert, so don't trust me on that. Contemporary romance, there's no like magic and stuff, but it's just a romance in a regular contemporary setting. Historical romance is in an olden setting. Fantasy romance is something that is set in a whole fantasy world. It's not set in the main world or this world, Earth Prime. But it's the main plot is still romance. The story is about two people getting together, right? Hi, kiddos. You thought it was 3 p.m. with daylight savings. Did daylight savings start? Did that happen? I don't even know. I don't even know. It's 4 o'clock for me. I don't know what time it is anywhere else. Sorry. But welcome. I'm glad you're here. I just finished talking about genre. Genre has abbreviations that I will talk about specifically when we get to pitch contests. Pitch contests are a whole other thing that a lot of people don't know about. Oh wow! So the clock was reset last night. Okay, now I know. So I guess in the U.S., is it still 4 p.m. where you are? What time? I don't even know. Yeah, I do remember Brendan says that it does reset around this time of month, and he vaguely remembers that it happened around this time when he was in DC. And I do know it resets around this time of year, but I don't know what day because I don't live in the US anymore. 3 p.m. at your house. Okay. Thanks, Nikki. Okay, so it's 3 p.m. now. In the non-Trini land. It is 3:08. Yes, because it is 4:08 here. Cool. Okay, so that's genre. Genre is usually, we'll abbreviate that in terms of like, for pitch contests, we'll use like hashtag F for fantasy, hashtag HF for historical fantasy, hashtag R, I guess, for romance, and things like that. But the abbreviations are fairly straightforward. SF for sci-fi. Just kind of use your discretion. I think PR is paranormal romance. It's very, it's pretty straightforward. You just kind of use the initials. So one of the things that helps define genre is your setting. Setting is the next term on my list, and your setting is just where your story takes place, whether it is here, it is in another universe, it is in modern times, it is in past times, it is in future times, etc. That's just the space, the location, time, space that your setting happens in. Um, and the next thing I want to talk about is tropes. So how did I jump from setting to tropes? I did it in this way because many tropes are actually important expectations of the genre and they help to define genre. So when we pick up a book in a specific genre, there are certain expectations we have, such as the romance and the happily ever after, right? Now, trope, by definition, according to Wikipedia, is a commonly recurring literary and rhetorical device, motif, or cliche. According to masterclass.com, it is a plot device or character attribute that is used so very commonly. Um, I agree with those definitions. Romance, again, coming back to that genre, there's like the forbidden love trope, the secret billionaire trope, the enemies to lovers trope. And then in fantasy, you've got tropes like the chosen one, the big evil, the quest. I would even go so far as to call vampires versus werewolves a trope. So those are tropes. Now, some tropes, like I said, they're expected in your genre, like the happily ever after with romance. But then there are other tropes that tend to become tired and unoriginal. And depending on the goals you have for your writing, you should probably engage in some research around the tropes that are involved in your genre and consider how you might subvert those tropes or otherwise develop some kind of interesting take on that trope, right? For example, there is a very harmful trope out there known as fridging. So, hat tip to my brother, J.S. Christian, who reminded me that I should add this term to the list. Fridging is a very harmful trope, usually about women, often the wife or the girlfriend of the main character or hero. I've also heard it or seen it applied to the mother of the male main character or hero. And so fridging is defined when one of these women, they are hurt, maimed, killed, raped, thrown into a coma, whatever. And the purpose of their suffering is actually to further the main character's story or the main character's motivation, where the main character is usually also male. Uh, that's what it means. That's what fridging means. And it's kind of important to know what that is so that you could identify if you have fridged one of your characters, particularly one of your female characters. I don't usually hear the term used outside of like female male relationships, usually heterosexual if it's like the wife or a girlfriend. But I'm sure that as we evolve and as our stories evolve, we're going to start hearing the term used more broadly. Um, it's a really interesting term, fridging. And I was curious about where it came from, so I did a little Googling last night. And if I'm not mistaken, and this was the middle of the night, so it could be, the term originated with Gail Simone, who observed that women in comics were disproportionately cut up and stuck in refrigerators, though not always literally. So Brennan Alexi says that there is LGBT fridging as well. I'm sure of it. That makes absolute sense. I don't know, I don't have on hand any specific examples of what LGBT fridging looks like because I'm not sure if it refers to the entire relationship or if it refers to like a single partner in a relationship or like what the specific context is. So Brendan says that LGBT fridging was a big critique of Netflix's Voltron. I didn't even know that. Uh, if you want to share more about that, Brendan, I will read it to the group or like throw it on the screen or something. Um, you could do that, and I'll keep going through the list of terms and definitions. But if you're willing to, I would like for you to do that for me, please, because I think it's important that we understand the different contexts of fridging and how it might be perpetrated in settings outside of that heterosexual setting that I explained. So, moving on, while hopefully Brendan is doing research on my behalf. The next thing I want to talk about is archetypes and stereotypes. So, Again, I know that there are people out there who are like, oh, well, it's basically the same thing. It's not. It's not. Stereotypes, for one, are generally very oversimplified, one dimensional ideas or concepts. They're cliches. And very often in storytelling, your stereotype is probably going to be very harmful or otherwise negative. For example, the is Lisbeth Salander an example of fridging? I don't know who Lisbeth Salander is. Am I supposed to know who Lisbeth Salander is? I guess I could Google that right now. You guys need to give me more context to work with here. I'm clueless. I don't know. Um, anyway, archetypes and stereotypes. So some examples of harmful stereotypes are the angry black woman or the submissive Asian or South Asian woman. And if you can't figure out why these are harmful stereotypes, that's a very different live stream, and I will get back to you another time. So Brennan explains to me that Lisbeth is the lead of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and I haven't read it or seen it, so I couldn't tell you. So that's a stereotype, right? It's really oversimplified. The difference is that an archetype has more layers. An archetype is more complex. An archetype can have a multitude of those layers. It's a pattern or a prototype, a kind of model, a series of characteristics that when you put them all together, they can kind of form the core of a character, but it's also not the be all and end all of that character. So, for example, I learned this specifically through taking some classes that I was I accessed this. So some months ago, I got this info stack link for a writer's stack that had a whole bunch of writing classes and stuff, and the whole stack, it was like hundreds of dollars worth of classes, and I mean hundreds, and the whole thing was $50 US, and I scrunted and I bought it. And this is one of the classes I was able to take. It was a class from Mary Buckham on archetypes, male and female archetypes. So, for example, one of the archetypes she uses in her class is the king, which is, we did refer to this really in the class as the father figure, but it is also the father figure is either the same or similar, right, archetype. And the king or the father figure is a very responsible and capable figure who is usually seeking to protect his family, kingdom, community, or whatever, right? Archetypes do have a dark side, so this king or this father figure might be over controlling or, might become selfish over time, in which case his archetype kind of changes. And that's another thing, is that archetypes change and evolve. Archetypes develop, right? And an archetype will present differently in different settings and different circumstances, whereas a stereotype is so oversimplified that they don't usually have the ability to evolve, change, develop, or appear differently from setting to setting or story to story. Yeah. So your archetype is a kind of pattern of characteristics that we find happen across, the human beings over time, like forever. And a stereotype is like a really oversimplified idea that's not actually real or realistic and is usually harmful. So Brendan is going to explain some things to us. So, spoiler alert for Voltron watchers. Shiro was kind of revealed to be gay in the last season of Voltron Legendary Defender, but after escaping the Gala and returning home, his partner mysteriously and unceremoniously died. People considered it akin to not just fridging his partner to give his character depth, but to sneakily get LGBT character points without actually displaying their relationship. I do remember this. And yes, still fridging. Completely agree. So I guess the point is not that the point is really that it's a partner of a main character, and that partner suffers in order to further the motivations, goals, character arc of the main character. And it doesn't matter what kind of relationship that is, whether it's an LGBT relationship or a heterosexual relationship or what have you. Okay, so now we're coming to age category. And age category is not the same as genre. And I apparently this is like a thing, like this is a problem that some people have, is that they think YA, which stands for young adult, is a genre. It's not. It's just an age category. YA means teens. Some people define YA as 12 and over. Some people define it as 14 and over, right? But the point is, mostly it's YA is for teenagers. Yeah. There's also adult, which is generally 18 and over, the adult age category. But there are also categories for younger people, usually middle grade, which is 8 to 12. I've also seen first chapters or early readers, which is, I think, 3 to 8. And then there's picture books, which I want to say is also 3 to 8, maybe 3 to like 5 or 6. I don't know. And then there's board books, which is for people 3 and under. So age category, not the same as genre. It strictly defines the expected age of your reader. So if you write a book that has adult content and is meant to be read by adults, then your age category is adult. But your genre is not adult because adult is not a genre. It's just an age category. There's also a kind of like ghost age category called new adult, which I have been told is not a real age category because usually if you are marketing this to a publisher, it's they're going to either have to shelve it in adult or they'll shelve it in young adult. There's no shelf for new adult. So what I've heard it described as it's adult, but with young adult crossover potential. So it's a book that is meant for adults, but young adults can read it. The new adults age category, for lack of a better term. Well, I mean, the term is age category. What am I saying? But the new adult was, I guess, meant for folks over 18, but not that adulty. So I suppose somewhere between 22 and 26, or 22 and 25. But it's not something that you should be trying to advertise to. Like if it's over 18, it's adult and it's adult. If you think that young adults will read it and like it, then you could say it's adult with young adult or YA crossover potential. Just remember that this is your age category and it's the intended age of your readers. It's not your genre, right? We've discussed genre. Age category also matters because sometimes, or more often than not, rather, the different age categories sort of have different expectations. So there are different themes and different issues that age categories will tackle in specific ways, or some age categories will tackle them and others will not, right? And that's kind of another reason that it's important. It gives you an idea of what kind of issues are being discussed or expected to be discussed. Genre does that as well, as we mentioned. So next is world building. So world building is basically what it sounds like. It's the process of creating a world for your characters. And if it is not this world, which I have been referring to as Earth Prime, then if it is in this world, then it's usually just called contemporary, I want to say. And you don't need to do any world building because you're using systems and everything that's already in place. But if you're writing something like fantasy or science fiction, then chances are you kind of have to create a new world, or it's sometimes referred to as a secondary world. And that might mean you have to do things like come up with a magic system, come up with new government systems, come up with new geography, culture, languages, and so on. Mention to Stephanie Boisbois. Stephanie is, I believe, a self-published author who has a class called World Building Bootcamp. Another lovely thing that I got out of this writer stack that I that I bought some months ago, and she's got a very comprehensive world building bootcamp that is useful if you're a new writer. Trying to come up with like your own world and build your own like brand new world. So let's see some examples Kiss Quotient is a contemporary romance by Helen Huang, and it's set in the present day real world. That author probably didn't have a whole lot of world building to do because it's the world we live in, right? There's not a whole lot to change. Versus something like The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. They are also contemporary, as in their present day, but this is a fantasy setting because Dresden Files has magic. So the author of those books would have had to develop a magic system, etc., and that would be world building, right? Now, all of that might be comparable to something like Children of Blood and Bone by Tommy Adeyemi. Now, that book is a straight up fantasy world. It is a totally new world, totally new geography, culture, new governing structures, and surely there's inspiration drawn from the real world, but that's not what this is. This is a totally different world. And so that would have needed more world building. Yep. Cool. So the next term I'm going to talk about is plotting. I have more than once on this channel talked about plotting versus pantsing and the in-between, which is plantsing. So I just figured I'd go over it one more time. And plotting is basically the method of writing that uses an outline. So you create an outline that signposts your way through the story instead of just free writing the entire thing. And that might include things like planning your major plot points and your major story arc, or your singular major story arc, or multiple major story arcs, whatever you're doing. You might also get more detailed and write your minor plot points. You might do character profiles. You might do extensive world building notes. You might write a synopsis, or you might even plan individual scenes, and I will come to what a scene is by definition. Pantsing is when you don't do any of this stuff. You just write by the seat of your pants, right? There's no outlining, there's no synopsis, you just write and you see what happens. Plantsing is a combination of plotting and pantsing. I don't actually personally know anyone who is a complete 100% pantser. Most of the people I know are plantsers. I think even myself included. I don't think that I pants completely. I definitely use tools that are considered plotting tools to push forward. But I don't really like start my journey with a plan often. Maybe like a beginning and an ending and an idea of how we get there, but right. So that's why I would say that, you know, I used to think that was pantsing, but the more I learned about pantsing is the less structure there is. And I'm like, I can't do that. So that's what plantsing is. It's that kind of in-between phase. Something else that you may hear when you start writing and you're like journeying into the world of the writing community and learning about, you know, what is you might hear the snowflake method. The snowflake method is a method of plotting by Randy Ingermanson. I really hope I got that name right. But basically, it starts with you doing a one-sentence summary of your story, and the snowflake method walks you through developing that one-sentence summary into an outline, into character profiles, breaking the novel into scenes, and all of that stuff. In my opinion, it's very extensive, but the thing that sets the snowflake method apart from other methods is that it's really designed to be revised and adjusted constantly, which is probably why it's often recommended to pantsers who are constantly changing their outline because they're just kind of writing with the spirit, right? Next, there is the story engine / story engineering. Now, the story engine, I only know of the story engine as the story engine deck, which was a thing that I supported on Kickstarter a while ago, and it's a prompt mechanism. So like you can pull out different cards and use it to come up with a prompt and use it to create your D&D campaigns or to write short stories or to write novels or what have you. The story engineering is from a book. Also, this is a way of plotting, but it's from a book by Larry Brooks called Story Engineering. Now, this method uses 4 competencies of storytelling, which is concept, character, theme, and plot or story structure, and 2 executional competencies, which is scene construction and writing voice. Story engineering has its own plot structure, and that breaks into 4 parts: the setup, the response, the attack, and the resolution. So that's what story engineering is. It's referring to Larry Brooks' methodology. Brendan says that if anyone wants to get a copy of the Story Engine deck themselves, I feel like there was something else there. Maybe there was a link. I can add a link to the Story Engine deck after this is all over, because it's really, really cool. It's just storyenginedeck.myshopify.com. I actually have the link here. I don't know why I don't have it there. Probably because I'm pantsing this. Anyway, so that's what story engineering is. The next thing is save the cat. There are a lot of folks out there, myself included, who just would hear save the cat, save the cat, save the cat. And I'm like, I don't know what save the cat is. What does that mean? And that's why it's here, because it's yet another method of plotting your novel or your any story. Save the Cat is Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, which is a book on story structure that was originally for screenwriting. But because good story structure is good story structure, whether it's on the screen or on the page, it was adjusted into a book for novel writing as well. And similarly to the story engineering, it separates the story arc, the story plot into it's kind of own parts, but Save the Cat uses the 3-act structure, so just act 1, act 2, act 3. But more importantly, oh my God, Nikki, I'm not even bothering with you. But more importantly, Save the Cat has 15 essential plot points that every story ought to have, right? And it lays out those plot points and what each of those plot points are meant to do or be. Now, these plot points might also be called beats. And that leads me to the next set of terms, which are beats and beat sheets. So a beat, like I said, is a plot point. Some plot points are kind of across all genres. For example, all genres have some kind of inciting incident, and they may call it something different, but an inciting incident is what it is. And I should probably define that, but I was not prepared to do it right here. And I expect that this is going to have a second part, because I don't think I'm going to get to the end of this list of 35 terms or groups of terms that I have, because it's already been 32 minutes and I'm on term number 14. Yikes. Anyway, there are also some plot points that are special or specific to certain genres or types of stories. For example, the romance genre has the stuck together beat and the grand gesture beat. If you want to know more about that, you can read Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes, which is where I learned all of this. And yeah, so that's it. So the beat is is a plot point. Now, a beat sheet at its most basic, in my experience, and if you know better, please tell me, because I could really only speak to how I've been able to access and use these things. But at its most basic, a beat sheet is basically a list of all the plot points laid out, and then there's like another column where you can write what is it that happens in your book that corresponds to that beat or that plot point, right? Now, that's kind of the most basic thing. What I actually originally used saw as the first beat sheet ever was an Excel file that also had the approximate page numbers and word counts where each of these plot points should happen, right? So it's either a range where that plot point should be having, Nikki says I should have plotted this presentation. Look, there's only so much plotting I could do as a planter, okay? And working full time, this shit ain't happening. So yikes. Anyway, So the beat sheet might have a range of words or pages, and that general range is where that plot point should go. And if it has a single number, then it means that it should probably happen before you've gotten to that word count or to that page number in your book. I do want to briefly show you what that looks like. So this here, I got this from the Jamie Gold website. Jamie Gold has a really extensive collection of beat sheets. And they're from like different story structures. They're available as Excel files, so you can just plug in the total word count that you're aiming for, and just kind of see exactly where each plot point should happen. So this is the one for Save the Cat, and you can see that these are the different plot points on Save the Cat. This is the description of the plot point. You can replace this with, you know, what you actually intended to have there, like as your plot point or whatever. And this is the pages and the word count, right? Like chapters blank, because who cares about chapters? At least not right now. Pages, your opening image is obviously on your first page, or your first two pages. It's going to be the first to the 500th word because it's the first two pages. One page is usually 250 words. The theme stated by the time you're at 2,275 words, your theme should be clear, right? You see that the word count here is a range 1 to 45, 50. So that's kind of within that period you should have set up your story. The catalyst, which I think is the Save the Cat version of the inciting incident, should happen by, 5,460 words. By the time you hit that number, that's it. And it's different for different. So like if I put in 90, is my keyboard on? Nope. If I put in 90,000 words, you'll see that these numbers change, right? And I think that's pretty cool. It is very formulaic, right? So this may not be the way that you decide that you want to plot your novel. You may not want to use this kind of strict method of doing things. But I think this is a very useful tool, and as I keep going, I'll explain why. So the next thing I want to help define is scene and sequel. It turns out that not as many people as I thought knew about this. Like I thought I was the only ignorant fool who didn't know what this was, but I'm not, and that kind of both makes me feel like I'm not that like stupid, but also just kind of surprises me. I learned about scenes and sequels, or action and reaction scenes, through, again, Mary Buckham, and all through by reading the Snowflake Method, the book. So a scene is really just a piece of your book where something happens, right? Your characters are interacting, maybe dialogue is happening, or there's an event, something is happening in your book. And just like a movie is made up of a bunch of scenes put together, so is your book. And scenes might be long or short. I've seen examples of like one-line scenes, which are, they exist. I mean, they're not for me, but they exist. And a scene might end or begin. Brendan, I just got a message from your good twin, and he wants the link for the stream. Could you send that to him since you're listening? Yeah, so scenes. So scenes might end or begin when you switch point of view, and I will talk about point of view. There are also location changes that might be the end of one scene and the beginning of another, or there's some kind of time gap. There are two types of scenes. Okay, so this is a thing you should know if you want to know what a scene is. There are two types of scenes. There are action scenes and there are reaction scenes. Sometimes a reaction scene is called a sequel. These two types of scenes are characterized by different things. An action scene has a goal. The goal is that small, bite-sized task that your character will need to accomplish in order to achieve the ultimate story goal. So let's say your character wants to build a stage. That's the story goal, right? Over the course of your story, your character is going to build a stage. So your scene goal might be the character's sourcing materials. right? That's before you build a stage, you gotta have materials. You also have to have like plans and all this sort of stuff. But you know, just for example, an action scene also has conflict. So if this character needs to build a stage, and that's the ultimate story goal, and your scene goal is to source materials, then the scene's conflict might be something like your character can't afford to buy the materials. A scene also has an action scene, also has a disaster or a complication. So after that task is accomplished, yay! That triumph leads to a complication. So maybe your character who had to build the stage and couldn't afford it decided to borrow money from a loan shark. So that's a complication. So now your character is in debt to a loan shark. Now, your complication or your disaster doesn't always need to be a direct result of the method used to accomplish the task, right? So, like maybe they made their purchase and that goes smoothly, but now the shipment is delayed for some reason beyond their control, right? But it's usually better or like considered better storytelling if you don't use that kind of hand of God method to just create problems, you know? So, like if there is a delay, maybe your antagonist is responsible somehow or something, right? Like make it make sense. I personally like the whole I borrowed money from a loan shark. Like that works better for me in this particular example. So a reaction scene is different. A reaction scene is also sometimes called a sequel, in that there is a reaction. Duh, right? But this reaction is usually specifically in response to whatever that previous disaster or complication was. And it takes the shape of stuff like self-reflection, recovery, angst, moping, all of those things. This is the time when the character growth is really happening, right? So this main character who is now in debt to a loan shark is maybe rethinking her decision, right? The reaction scene also has a dilemma. So you get the money from the loan shark, and now you find out that your mother needs surgery. Do you pay for the surgery with this money from the loan shark, or do you buy the materials for the stage like you were planning to? Brendan is not the evil twin. Also, Ryan, if you did get the link, just let me know that you're here. Right. So, gosh, where was I? Angst. Okay, the reaction scene is reacting. All right, there we go. And then there's the dilemma. So, you know, do I pay for surgery or do I buy the materials for the stage? And then there's the decision, right? Maybe your character, you know, decides to build a stage and now she's got to figure out how to pay for her mom's surgery. Yeah. And that's it. That's your reaction scene / sequel. So action scene is goal, conflict, complication, and reaction scene is reaction, dilemma, decision. And the decision that happens in your reaction scene leads on to the goal for the next action scene. Now, reaction scenes are normally, like I said, where your character experiences growth and change. And then action scenes are places where that growth or change is demonstrated, however small that demonstration might be. As a result, your action scenes are usually faster paced than your reaction scenes, and they sometimes happen in shorter periods of time as well than your reaction scenes. Let's see what is next. Pacing, of course. So I did say that action scenes are faster paced than reaction scenes, so I guess it makes sense to explain what pacing is. When you put your story together, you put all of your scenes and sequels or like action and reaction scenes together. That's what defines or how you control the pacing of your story, right? According to Writer's Digest, pacing is the speed and rhythm with which your story is told. Usually, the more tension that is in a scene, the faster the pace is, and the more introspection or narrative that there is in a scene, the slower the pace is, right? So one more time, if there's more tension in a scene, it's faster. And if there's more introspection and narration or narrative, the slower is the scene. Pacing can be controlled in a lot of ways. And that's usually things like the length of your sentences. So a shorter sentence is faster pacing. Things like your word choice, using active words, and your sentence, or like energetic language, I guess, and your sentence structure. So like a long meandering sentence, a very descriptive narrative sentence, that's going to be slower paced than, a short kind of quick sentence. More dialogue usually, makes for faster pacing. Introspection, narrative description, all of that, usually longer pacing. An easy way to tell if your pacing is fast or slow is usually the white space on the page. If there's more white space on the page, it's probably a faster paced scene. Yep. And all of this kind of matters because there is something that we like to talk about called the saggy middle. So I mentioned all of these things and the beat sheet and the scene elements and all of that because these are actually tools that I use to make sure that my pacing is fast enough that I don't end up with a saggy middle. If you're using that 3-act structure from Save the Cat, the saggy middle is your act 2. If you're using a different structure, the saggy middle is the middle. Right? The middle is where all of your character growth normally happens. Which is why it can easily end up kind of long and drawn out because it might be full of reaction scenes, right? And if it's full of all these reaction scenes, there's a chance that it may also end up full of information and moments that are not necessarily very important or the most important for us to get to where the story's going. And when you have this long drawn out middle, that's what they refer to as the saggy middle because you've got this piece here, you're going, yeah, this is going well, and then it's like, whoa. And then you get to the end, and it's like, yeah, okay, we're going. Cool. So that's what the saggy middle is. And I think that using those tools, the beat sheet and using your scene elements as a way to kind of measure what your scenes are doing and how many of them you have and how many reaction scenes are put together so you know how long something is or how short something is. That, in my opinion, kind of helps you to avoid that saggy middle. Whew, I'm going to have some water. While I'm having some water, Nikki says, everyone hates the second book in a trilogy. Yeah, the saggy middle, right? That's how it goes. So, while I have my water, please ask me questions or something because I know that I spend these streams and all I do is just talk, but oh my god, today's worse than ever. Okay. I'm just gonna wait here. Just for a second. Whew, 47 minutes and I'm at number 18 of my list of 30-something. There's a very strong chance we do not make it to the end of this list, and I continue this list next week. Okay. What are some tips I can give for ending a story? That is a whole different conversation, K-Bat. Bruh. I'm not prepared for this question. I will prepare an answer and I will get back to it. I promise. I will get back to you. So how do you do that in the middle? I don't know what that is. Nikki, when you say that, what are you referring to? I'm gonna have to wait for her answer. And there's this delay. So weird. While I wait, I guess, just so that I'm not sitting here staring at the screen or the camera, I'm gonna keep going forward. We talked about the saggy middle. Now I want to talk about climax, rising action, and falling action. Now, these are 3 parts of a 5-part structure, which is yet another way to plot, right? In my opinion, it's much more basic and bare bones than the methods I recommend. Well, not recommended, the methods I described earlier. I don't recommend any of them. I'm not recommending things today. Mm. Oh, okay. Sorry, Nikki. I think I missed that comment. So Nikki said that everyone hates the second book in a trilogy. The issue is that nothing is revealed and nothing is resolved. So how do you do that in the middle? And that's how this question came up. So this I can answer. Now, the short is you should reveal and like do things like that in the middle. There are things that should be resolved. If you're going to have a whole trilogy, in my opinion, and like I'm kind of a nobody. Well, not kind of. I'm nobody. But whatever. This is my opinion. It's my channel. I'm gonna say what I want. Okay. If you're gonna have a trilogy, stuff needs to be happening in every one of those books. You don't always have to make your middle book your whole act two, right? Your acts could be spread across, and then of course that middle book, it might act as the act two of your trilogy, but that book itself should have its own three-act structure, right? And something that a lot of people identify is the cause of a saggy middle is that things, like you said, don't always or very rarely get revealed or resolved. So the standard advice is that one of the things you can do to avoid a saggy middle is that your action scenes that lead to these reaction scenes that are happening in the middle, right? Is, well, obviously you increase the action scenes so that your middle is not nothing but reaction. But also some of the things that you leave to the end, instead of leaving all of the reveals and all of the twists and all of the things at the end, bring some of those into the middle, and let them happen earlier so that you can and find ways to kind of like tie them in so that at the end it's not kind of a loss that it wasn't revealed all the way to that point. Like, spoiler alert, if you watch Game of Thrones, that the Kit Harington, the Jon Snow, Kit Harington character guy, that guy, curly black hair dude. So it's like revealed, that he's a Targaryen. I'm getting this right. Yeah, I've read the books, like, and I've seen the show. I should know this, right? So it's revealed that he's a Targaryen. And if you had read the books, like, you kind of figure that out fast. You figure that out real fast. And like when it happened in the movies and the TV show isn't a movie. When it happened in the TV show, I think there were like 5 people who had read the books and were surprised because like you figure that out in book 1. I don't understand why that reveal was held off for so long. I mean, it was nice, I guess. Yeah, whoo, like tension stuff, like I don't know, mystery. But like I don't think that would, like, there are all sorts of other things you could have done. Maybe that's a bad example because like George R.R. Martin is obviously a very well known and very well loved writer. But I mean, if people were able to figure that out really early on, I don't know that I felt it was so important to leave it to the end. So that's the kind of thing, if you have something like that in your story, why not reveal that earlier in? Wow, Giddles, this question come in late, dog. Are tropes / cliches bad? Aren't they a way to quickly connect with reader expectations? So yes and no. For Giddle's sake, I'm going to go back to my trope definition. Yes, tropes are an important part of the genre, and they usually help to define what we expect when we pick up a book of a certain genre or subgenre. However, some tropes can become tired, boring, and unoriginal, so it depends on the goals you have for your writing, what you want to do. And there are some harmful tropes, such as fridging, which, Gills, boy, you're gonna have to like rewind and watch this later, because I here for like an hour already. It, and not again. Anyway, so yeah, so like ways to relieve your saggy middle are basically, instead of sticking all of the reveals and resolutions in your act 3, is to bring some of those reveals and revelations, those resolutions, into act 2 and use those to power into act 3, and find ways to use them to like increase the tension for Act 3 so that your payoffs for whatever the big payoff is at the end are even higher or even better. Which brings me to this whole rising and falling action and climax thing. So as I was saying before, is that these are basically this is the baseline structure that all of the other structures I mentioned use. It's exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, right? So your exposition is where you set up and explain everything. Your rising action is where you encounter all of the problems. Your tension is rising. The climax has the highest amount of tension, and it's a turning point that leads to the falling action, where the main character is solving problems and the tension is being released, and it tumbles down into the resolution, which is sometimes called the denouement, which I am not French, so I don't use that word because I also probably pronounce it badly, and I keep forgetting to hide comments that I click on. Sorry. Anyway, that's what rising and falling actions mean and what your climax is meant to do. The other structures that I spoke about, like Save the Cat, story engineering, they take these same 5 points and that same kind of like heartbeat peak almost, definitely almost because it doesn't usually dive. And they break those 5 parts into smaller pieces and like smaller plot points that they put together to help you kind of meet smaller goals, right? They've just broken it down into smaller parts. Whew. Okay. Wow. I knew that this would be hard to get to all 35, but I did not think it would be this hard to take this long. I may stop at voice. I actually have, I'll switch as number 20 on my list, and then I'll talk about 21 through 36 later. Let's see how it goes. I don't know. Okay. The next thing is POV. POV stands for point of view. And I don't know if Erin will ever see this, but Erin from the G Squad Discord server is the person who recommended I add this to my list because it is obviously a very important part of writing. Your point of view might be single point of view, which is one character, or multiple points of view. So you're telling your story through the perspective of multiple characters. Let me rewind that a bit and try to be a little bit more coherent. So POV stands for point of view. It's the perspective or lens through which you're going to be writing your story. Multi-POV means you're going to be telling that story through multiple different perspectives. Usually, your point of view is first person or third person. First person point of view means you're telling the story directly through the eyes of one of your characters using I, right? I climbed the hill. I walked to the barber. I scratched my butt, right? And I think the important thing to remember in the case where you're using first person POV is to remember that what your character is and isn't seeing or doesn't know, your reader is and isn't seeing, doesn't know, right? So when I look at, or when I, the character who you're writing through, let's say, look this way, I might hear noises coming, from that room, which indicate that my cats are like yelling at each other, but I can't actually see the cats. So you can describe the noise, but you can't describe what the cats are doing because I can't see that. There's also third person point of view. Third person adds some distance, right, away from the I point of view, the first person. But you can do deep third person, which is basically the same thing as first. You're just referring to your character by name and pronoun. So instead of I scratch my butt, it'll be K scratch your butt. Or you might choose to do something in more like an omniscient third person point of view, which gives you a lot more distance from the character. And basically, it's where you're God. So you, the narrator, you're basically God and you know everything that's happening to everyone. So like in that case, if I looked in this direction and you were a third person omniscient point of view narrator, even though I can't see that the cats are fighting, you do. And so you can still describe it if you wanted, right? Um, so basically, yeah, you can, in third person omniscient, you can basically know everything that's happening to everyone and describe one person's feelings, emotions, and physical expressions just like anyone else. Whereas in something like first person point of view, like if I'm in first person point of view, I'm not describing my own face, right? Like, because I'm not looking at it. I might describe what the camera looks like with this little like blue things and it's like dots or whatever, but yeah. Whew. Okay. Voice. Thanks again to Erin from the G Squad Discord server for reminding me to include voice because I have my own personal like issues. People are always asking what voice is. Newcomers to writing or to professional writing or to any kind of writing that involves the rest of the writing community and doing things like sharing their manuscript with others. They ask what voice is, right? And so many people are just like, oh, well, if you know what voice is, then you know what voice is. And if you don't, you don't. And it's like, screw you guys. What? That is, duh. I can't stand that. Anyway, so voice usually refers to the narrative voice. The person or the perspective that's telling the story is your narrator. And your voice is that combination of tone, grammar, language, dialect, or whatever, phrasing, etc., that all comes together to make the narrator's personality clear, right? I have not actually read a specific definition that says it comes together to make the narrator's personality clear, but in my opinion, that's what it does. And if you look at how people talk about a strong voice, it usually means that when you are reading something, the voice of the narrator is so strong that it is distinct. You can clearly identify the narrator's personality, right? Their attitude. You can understand who this person is. If this person was speaking to you, you could clearly tell that this is a different person to, let's say, anybody else who walks into the room and starts talking, right? Voice is particularly important. I mean, it's particularly important, period. It's very important. But if you're writing first person point of view or deep third person, where the character voice and the narrative voice are the same, it's extremely important for that voice to be distinct and strong. People are starting to say, or maybe they've said it for a while and I've only just noticed, but they say the word voicey. So they'll read something and they'll be like, ooh, this is very voicey. And that is the exact context in which I first heard it. Oh, this is so voicey. And that just means it's a strong voice. It's a distinct voice or personality. It means that I'm going to read this, and if I read something else, I can tell that that's something else was not something from this character, right? Or if somebody else tried to mimic it, they would probably do a bad job because that voice is so distinct and clear and strong. A character voice is not always the same as a narrative voice because the character might not be or might never narrate the story to the reader. Now, if you have multiple points of view, then you will have you should have multiple voices, right? Because one character should not sound the same as the other. They should have a different speech pattern, right? Their tone should be different when you write it. Perhaps the grammatical structure would be different, or the words that your individual characters choose to use are different. Your character voice, even if it is not a narrative voice, should still be distinct. And you can usually use things like dialogue and body language to set your different characters apart. Nikki says, add voicey to my list of words that I hate. Yes, and you should. I don't like it. I think it's, yeah. Anyway. So yes, so when you write one character, speech patterns, body language, all of these different things that describe them should probably be different to the other characters, right? I mean, obviously there's going to be similarities and there's overlap and stuff, but they should be clearly distinct. Whew. It's been an hour and 4 minutes and change. I'm not sure if I should keep going. I'm not sure if I should keep going because I will probably go for like at least another 30 minutes just based on what is left on this list. Yikes. It's such a long list. Like it's such a long list of things that nobody tells you what they mean or what they are or what they're about. And you just have to kind of flail and find out for yourself sometimes the very hard way. Do we have any questions so far? So I'm at number 20 out of 35 or 36. I think it's actually 36 things on this list. Yep. So I'm number 20 out of 36 items on this list to kind of explain. The big, long definition things are out of the way. That was like scene and pacing and all of that. Like all of that was very detailed voice. I tried to be kind of detailed with that. All of those things are out of the way. Are there any questions so far? Are there any terms that you're interested in learning about that I haven't yet tackled in this first 20? Yeah, I'm gonna drink some water and give you guys a chance to tell me before I decide if I'm gonna keep going or not. Um, I think I'm gonna push to finish this, mostly because I'm sure that there are going to be more words and phrases and so on that are going to come up as time goes on, and I may want to do this again. And I want to just not necessarily do that next weekend. So I'm gonna keep. I think I'm gonna keep moving forward here. So let's see. MS and MS format. Oh, oh wow, you guys are like just hearing my question. This lag is killing me every time, man. So Kavi Trady says, no questions yet, soaking it all in. Things I never knew were words for. There were words for that vaguely existed in my mind, but I couldn't quite describe. Thanks. You're welcome. I'm glad that I could be informative and useful in some way. I kind of wish that I had had access to something like this when I first started getting more serious about my writing. And it's the reason I decided to do this. Okay, so MS and MS format. MS stands for manuscript, and MS format usually refers to standard manuscript format. Standard manuscript format is something that I would recommend that you Google because you can easily find it and you can find templates for it. But it includes like how you put your page numbers and your like identifying stuff at the top. Whether like some people don't want you to have identifying stuff at the top because they want to read manuscripts blind, so you don't want that. It talks about like what the first page of your manuscript should look like and all of that. But the one thing that is common that I've seen across all versions of what they want your manuscript to be formatted like is that it is almost always double spaced, always double spaced. And generally, you use a font like Times New Roman. Some people still use Courier. And that's because you want an average of 250 words per page. And thanks, Giddles. He says, no lie, I'm taking notes. This is insanely informative. Greatly appreciate you compiling these. I'm really glad that at least two of you have said that because I would like move on with my life and just like cross my fingers that one day somebody who needs this information comes across it. And I didn't just like sit here and talk at you for like an hour and a half. All right. So it's double spaced and it's usually 250 words per page, whatever the font you use, that's what it's got to be. Most places will tell you what font you should use. They'll probably say something like Times New Roman. And the reason is because on a book, like on the physical book, it's going to be roughly 250 words on that page, I want to say. Or sorry, KBAT, that's okay. Because daylight savings times. On the bright side, like you have my personal phone number. You can just ask me these questions. um, and also like you could just go back to the beginning of this video once it's up. Because it will just like it will take some time to process on YouTube, and then it will be like, boop, here we go, episode 9, and you'll be good to go. Um, I would like to. I don't. I'm still such a YouTube noob. Like I don't really know crap about YouTube and how it works. But I've seen other videos where you can put timestamps for stuff in the description. If I could figure out how to do that, then I will. No promises. Okay. So the 250 words per page on your standard manuscript format, because that's what it's going to be like in the book, and they want to see how many pages you'll have in total, right? And that's going to be helpful. Next, there is CP, beta, and alpha reader. Once again, thanks to Mel in that G Squad Discord server who mentioned that I should include this on my list. CP stands for critique partner. Critique partner is somebody who you would exchange your manuscript or your WIP, WIP, which stands for work in progress. You'll exchange this with them at early stages. And your critique partner is going to obviously critique your work. But the point is that that person is not, your critique partner has to have some kind of balance. They're critiquing your work, but they obviously need to do that in a way that's not going to demotivate you. Because if your critique partner is demotivating, you get rid of them. It is a red flag. Okay, CPs, critique partners, should not be stripping you down at all. All right. So these people, these critique partners, you're going to share your work, exchange your work at early stages, and they will help you to develop that. They will help you to find plot holes. They will help you to figure out if this scene works or doesn't work, if it's important or not important. When you're struggling with changes and you're trying to come up with new ideas, you can bounce ideas off your critique partner. You can usually have, you should be able to have discussions with them. And remember, not just about your work in progress or your manuscript, but also their manuscript. Because your partners, you're working to help each other on your 2 separate manuscripts. Okay. Now, you work with them until they just don't really have Nikki says that there's probably a YouTube video to show me how to do the timestamp thing. Yeah, there probably is. The question is, will I have the time to read it? I mean, watch it. Okay. Now, a critique partner is different to a reader. The biggest difference, in my opinion, being that you're not exchanging manuscripts, right? A reader is just reading. You're not necessarily taking their manuscript as well. An alpha reader is someone that you may still give your early and unfinished work to get their opinions, right? People have different feelings about the roles of alpha readers or any kind of readers versus critique partners. But I think that if you have an alpha reader who's willing to give you the kind of critique that a critique partner can, then I don't see why you wouldn't say, yes, please give me your feedback. I mean, unless they're like woefully underqualified or something, which, I mean, if they are reading it as a reader, they should at least be able to give you the opinion of a reader, right? And so you're going to give them your kind of unfinished or early stage manuscript, but there's no exchange. So you're not reading their work as well. Now, a beta reader is different to an alpha and a CP in that your beta reader is going to get the book when it is as finished as the book, when it is as finished as you can make it. And they're specifically looking to give you a reader's perspective on what they've read. And they're not looking to do like a more specific critique or help you with developmental edits and stuff. I mean, they'll still probably point out like plot holes or things they didn't understand or anything that wasn't clear, but that's going to be as a reader, not as another writer. Now, an alpha reader is also going to be doing these things as a reader and not as another writer. But like I said, I think, in my opinion, if somebody's reading your work and they're willing to give you deeper critique, especially if they are also writers, then by all means, even if you're not swapping manuscripts, get that critique, right? Get the feedback. That's important. There's also something out there called a sensitivity reader. Sensitivity readers are fairly new in the scheme of the whole publishing industry. But, well, I mean, they're not that new, but like their popularity is much greater right now, right? Like recently. But the sensitivity reader is going to read your manuscript and they will look for an address in a letter to you or in a message or however you guys make your arrangements. They're going to look for specific issues that are problematic to a particular community or group of people. So if your book features LGBTQ characters, or if you are not a person of color, but there are characters in your book who are people of color, not the main character. I think that if you're white, you should not be writing main characters who are people of color because people of color should be writing those characters. And if you're white and you're writing those characters, then you should piss off. But anyway, so sensitivities readers will read your manuscript and look specifically for issues that could be problematic and make sure that you are dealing with sensitive issues in a sensitive way and that is not harmful to any group of people. So, you might have a sensitivity reader for, like I mentioned, LGBTQ people. You might have sensitivity readers for particular cultures that you may not be the most familiar with. You may have sensitivity readers for particular kinds of relationships, so like maybe like abuse or racism, or you could have sensitivity readers for interracial relationships or for specific types of experiences like moving to a new country, right? Just to make sure that things are addressed respectfully and not harmfully in any way, so that when you put your book out there, nobody's like, ew, well, you have, oh, it's a really good example. I forget the name of the author, but a best-selling author published a book recently, not self-published. I believe that this author was published with a major house. Um, Recently published a book where I think they compared dreadlocks to leeches or something like that. It was really like gross, and so like it was not nice. It was not okay. It was not okay. And that's the kind of thing you should have a sensitivity reader for, to make sure that you don't do crap like that. And if I'm not mistaken, um, the there was a sensitivity reader for the book, but that part was put in after the sensitivity reader read it, so it wasn't picked up. Uh, so you can see why this is an important thing for you to have. Now, you'll use all of the feedback from your critique partners, your sensitivity readers, your beta readers, your alpha readers, all of these folks. Um, oh, Brendan has a thing. So Brandon Alexi, or Brendan, says, I think a potential issue with non-people of color authors not writing people of color characters is that they continue creating stories where people of color and others don't exist. That's not to say that they shouldn't do the work of creating whole characters or piss off, but that we should all be writing diverse roles. Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, you should certainly write a story where there's a diverse cast of characters, including multiple people of color. But I don't think that you should be writing main characters who are people of color. And that's my only issue. Like, I think people of color should be writing characters of color as their main character. They could write white ones too, because like I kind of think that's just fair. But there are lots of, I think, non-people of color who are writing main characters of color that ultimately ends up harmful because they're appropriating somebody else's voice. Um, and to me, that's a problem. You should definitely have diverse characters no matter what, but don't write your main character as a person of color if you're not a person of color. And definitely have sensitivity readers review these other characters, right? Like the story and their roles in it, to make sure that there are no harmful tropes or there's no like inadvertent racism or microaggressions to others and so on, unless it was like unless it's purposeful in some way and it serves some greater purpose, or some greater message that you're purposely trying to portray. Uh, and like, just whatever that message is, don't be a white savior message. Anyway, once you've got your critique partner feedback, all of your alpha reader and sensitivity reader feedback and beta reader feedback and all of that, what you should be doing as you're collecting that feedback is editing your book, right? So editing is that process of reviewing terminology main versus lead. In my experience, main characters and lead characters, they may be used interchangeably. So I'm not sure there's like a big difference, I guess. I don't know, I'm thinking about it. Mm-mm. Oh, I see what you're trying to say. So Nikki says, I don't want to see white writers only writing people of color as secondary or tertiary characters, not lead characters or heroes of the book, but a main character maybe. So like a love interest might be, I see what you're saying. Okay. So in this situation, what we might be saying is that um, a main character or a lead character is still a major character, but they may not necessarily be the book's protagonist. And that is a whole other term I'm going to have to define, I guess. The protagonist, who is the hero of the book. I know that I put hero in little like air quotes. Um, okay. So sure, like you could have like a lead character or a main character might be a love interest, and that might be a person of color, even though the protagonist, like the person who the story is about or the point of view that the story is following, might be a white person, right? Or the our best friend or a sidekick or something, you know, or an antagonist even. Though again, I think that is kind of complicated because like we don't necessarily just want white people to constantly write um like you said secondary or tertiary characters uh as you know people of color as secondary or tertiary characters who are just like sidelined by this main by this big main like white person character but I do think that it's harmful um Brennan says, I think everyone should be writing more main characters that are people of color or LGBT or differently abled once they're doing the work and they get called out for their shit. You see, I don't think that I agree that white people should be writing characters that are people of color as their main characters or as their point of view perspective characters. I think that is so incredibly likely to be harmful and it takes away okay. Um there is there was an example of this, some time ago. I want to say it was a few months or a few weeks ago. A few months. It was a few months ago. I want to say, ugh, that there was a white woman who wrote a story about an indigenous Hawaiian girl. And that indigenous Hawaiian girl's journey to do whatever, right? It was young adult fantasy, I want to say. And the thing is that there are lots of indigenous Hawaiian writers who could write that story. And the problem is not that I don't want you to write stories that are like of people of color. The problem is that those white writers are going to get their story out into the public for others to see, and their story is going to be the representation of the indigenous Hawaiian people, right? That's not quite accurate, but like hopefully you guys get what I'm saying because this video has been long and I'm starting to get tired. But basically, if an actual indigenous Hawaiian writer writes a similar story with an indigenous Hawaiian main character, then publishers are going to look at it and they're going to be like, oh, well, we already have that story. We don't need another one. Now, not all publishers will. Some will be like, oh, this is doing really well. Let's publish it. But it's taking the place of a voice that doesn't belong to that writer, right? So like I think that if that white person, for example, had written a story where the main character and the point of view character was perhaps a young Black woman. Nobody was going to let that fly. That was not going to be allowed. Okay. Like, let's be completely serious here, that people would, and people did, for this, the writer who had the Hawaiian Indigenous character, um, people did like totally call that out as not okay. But it would be, I think, more obviously not okay in the if it had been a young Black woman as the character and a white person had written it. That's super harmful. There are lots of Black voices out there. There are lots of Indigenous Hawaiian voices out there. There are lots of Indian voices out there. There are that they deserve a place on the shelf, and that voice should belong to the people they're claiming to represent. Because if a main character is Black, or a main character is Indian, or a main character is Indigenous, I feel like the writer should be the voice, like should be from that culture, because that's what it's aiming to represent, right? Like that is what it's going to represent. Like if I pick up a book and the main character is Indian, I'm going to be like, oh hey, Indian character, Indian representation. And then I find out that the writer is white. It doesn't matter how good that book was. I'm going to be kind of like, that kind of sucks. I was so excited to see another Indian voice, but it's a white voice with like blackface on. It took me a really long time to get there, but I think that that's the thing. Like, that's the example. That's the example. That's the analogy. That's the thing. I don't think that that's okay, right? Like I don't think that it's okay to be a white voice with a like some spray tan or something. That's not okay. I'm also getting super off track here. This happens all the time, but I'm not too mad about it, because I think that this particular conversation is a very important one to have, right? If you're going to represent someone's voice, you should be that someone. If you're going to represent a community's voice, you should be from that community. I would not begin, like, I cannot conceive of writing a character that is not a bisexual Indo-Trini woman, because I don't know how to write from a perspective that's not. And don't get me wrong, I might do thought experiments so that I could kind of try to stretch my, oh my God. What about if you're the Prime Minister of Canada? I am not trying to like accidentally cause an international incident of any kind, so I ain't saying shit about that. I am guessing that you finally hit the blackface comment. Whew. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna finish my list. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna finish my list. So, sensitivity readers, we got that. Editing. Editing is the process of reviewing and revising your manuscript to improve that manuscript. And there are different kinds of editing that you could do. There is developmental editing, there's line editing, and there's copy editing. Developmental editing is when you aim to improve the plot, the story arc, etc. It's the big picture story. You're looking at that and you're trying to fill plot holes. You're trying to strengthen your character arcs. You're trying to make sure that there's no like logical inconsistencies over the course of your plot. That's all developmental editing. Okay. It's all the big picture structural stuff. You want to make sure that the house is strong and it's not gonna just like blow over like a house of cards. Line editing is when you start zooming in. So you've got your big picture, developmental editing, and then you're going to zoom in and start looking line by line. And line editing is where you choose the right words. It's where you tighten up your sentences. It's where you take out your filter words. And filter words is going to be something I'll have to describe in another another video because I don't have that one prepared, and I've already got so many terms, and I'm already like an hour and a half into this thing. But that's what line editing is for. It's for looking at the individual lines and figuring out if they are conveying the meaning you want them to convey, if they're saying the thing you want them to say, and if they are doing that efficiently and beautifully, right? Unless you don't want it to be a beautiful line, in which case, like, whatever you're aiming for. Copy editing is when you're at the line level, but you're not looking for things like tone and style and flow. You're looking for things like grammar and punctuation and making sure that whatever language you're writing in, you're following conventions that are intended to be followed. Unless you're purposefully breaking them, that's a different story, and I can't speak to that because I don't do that. Ooh, excuse me. Okay, and that's it. Now, these last few should go pretty quickly. I'm crossing my fingers that they do. Traditional versus self-publishing. So you may hear trad pub or traditional publishing, and then you hear self-pub, self-publishing, and so on. Traditional publishing means that you are seeking to be published by a publisher, by like an already existing publishing house or press, or maybe an indie press even, that already does the work of they'll purchase your book, they'll give you, well, the purchase of rights to distribute the book and stuff, right? They'll give you an advance, all of that stuff. That's traditional publishing. Yeah, where you sell the rights to a publisher. And then there's self-publishing, where you are the publisher. You're not selling the rights to anybody else. You are doing the work of putting the book together and getting it formatted and figuring out your cover and everything. And you might hire people out to do some of these things. Like you might hire a professional cover designer. You might hire somebody to format the book. And you might pay a company to do physical prints, which you could do like Ingram Spot might do that. Amazon will do that, etc. But you are the force behind that book existing, right? You can think of it as a producer. So, and I might totally screw this up, Brendan. I hope you're still listening so you can correct me. But basically, the producer is the money behind the money behind a TV show or a movie. And then the showrunner gets it all done. So in traditional publishing, you have a producer and a showrunner, and they buy the rights to your book to do the things with your book. And in self-publishing, you are the producer and the showrunner, right? I hope that comparison makes sense, and I didn't totally screw that up. So if you seek to be traditionally published, that is, you would like a publisher to purchase the rights to your book. Many, not all, but many publishers will not accept your manuscript from you directly. Okay? They will only consider proposals from agents. An agent is a professional, well, in this case, because we're talking about books and writing books, a literary agent is a professional who will create a proposal and submit that proposal to editors at publishing companies that will not take your book directly from you, right? I mean, they may submit it to publishing companies who are also open to accepting directly from authors. But the point is, they can access all of the publishers that won't talk to you directly, right? Agents work on commission. So I believe the industry standard is 15%. So your agent will take roughly 15% of your advance and your royalties. If you get an agent, they kind of liaise between the publisher and you and help you to deal with all the publishing stuff, right? You don't actually have to, I mean, you will likely talk directly to the editors and stuff in the publishing house, but if there are problems, your agent is there to help mediate. Your agent is there to give you advice. Your agent is going to look at your contract with the publisher and make sure that it's cool. They will negotiate on your behalf to get a better contract and a better deal, a higher advance or royalty or whatever it is, right? There are also schmagents. I've definitely heard people use the term schmagent before, and that's basically a shady agent. A schmagent is a bad agent or a shady agent. For example, if your agent says you should be paying them up front, that's a schmagent because agents don't work that way. There are lots of videos out on the interwebs where you could figure out like how they give you advice on how to tell the difference between an agent and a schmagent. Um, this is not one of those videos, so you can go Google for them, or I don't know, ask me to do something like that later. Okay, if you want to acquire an agent, so you want to get an agent, you need to query your agent. Well, you need to query several agents until one of them bites. And a query is another thing that I think some people hear, but they don't really understand what it is or what it's for. Now, a query has multiple parts, and querying is the process of sending your query package or parts of your query package to different agents to see who might be interested in representing you, right? Now, a query package has a lot of different parts and different agents ask for different parts of your query package. Your query package will have a query letter, which is basically the cover letter, and you'll send it. It will have your book's genre, your book's age category, your word count, your title. It will have a description of your story, which is intended to be kind of like a hook. So like, this is what my story's about. You're gonna like it. And then it should have like a short bio, right? So just like a one-page quick cover letter type deal. Your query usually also, you should prepare a synopsis, and a synopsis is 1 or 2 pages that has all the spoilers. So it is your book start to finish. In summary, it will have all of the important things, all of the plot points, etc., that are that's gotta be followed, and it reveals the ending, it reveals your twists, it reveals everything. I don't know what Candy's laughing at. I'm seeing a laugh. Is this the Schmagent thing? Is that what y'all are hearing right now when I'm seeing this? Sounds like it might be. So that's your synopsis, right? It's got all the spoilers, all the things. Your query package usually will also have your first X pages. It's usually your first 50 pages that you prepare, but different agents, some agents only want your query letter. Some agents want your query letter and your synopsis. Some agents also want pages, which sometimes you'll see the first 10 pages, sometimes you see the first 20 or 30, sometimes you see the first 50 pages. Yeah, and that's it. That's the pages of your manuscript of your work in progress. So that's a query, and querying, and a synopsis. A blurb is just the stuff that's on the back cover of a novel. Sometimes they want you to write your own blurb, and it might be part of your query letter depending on how you want your hook. So like, some people, I know, they'll write that story description / hook, and it's basically the same as the blurb that they'd put on the back of the book, right? Yes. That blurb is always going to change, because if you get this, if this book is being published by a publisher, very likely, especially if it's a bigger publisher, they're going to write their own blurb. Like, their marketing team will do a blurb for you. But until you get to that point, you can have your own blurb. Pitch and pitch contests. So a pitch is exactly what a pitch is in any other industry, right? Like an elevator pitch almost. But we hear it, I think, in the writing community. We hear this most often when it comes to things like Twitter pitch contests. I don't know the origin of the Twitter pitch contest. I just know that they are a thing that exists. If you are seeing this, I actually have a public calendar that has a list of all of that was like on the calendar, all of the upcoming pitch contests, and I update it every couple of weeks. So if you want the link to that, I don't know, get in touch with me somehow, leave a comment, something, I'll send it to you. But basically, so let's give you let me give an example. PitMad is a very popular one. On Twitter, on a specific day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., usually Eastern Standard Time, you have the opportunity to write a tweet length pitch. And this tweet length pitch should include hashtags specific to the pitch. So if you're pitching at the particular contest called PitMad, then it's going to be hashtag PitMad. If you're pitching at a different one, it might be something like hashtag DVPit, which is another pitching contest, or hashtag PBPit or PitDoc. All of these are pitch contests. And you'll write your pitch and you'll use that hashtag. And for most of them, you also have to put an age category, so hashtag A for adult, hashtag YA for young adult, MG for middle grade, etc. Genre, hashtag F for fantasy, hashtag R for romance, hashtag HF for historical fantasy, hashtag PR for paranormal romance, and so on and so on. SF for sci-fi. And I think those are like the main things that you must have like those hashtags for. And then the rest of the tweet should consist of your pitch. Your pitch might also include what we call comp titles or comparative titles. These are books or movies or TV shows or whatever that your story can compare to kind of give you that vibe of like what this story is about. Or what like the vibe of the story is like. Yeah. So you put you do your pitch, you tweet it, we tweet on the thing, and agents and editors are usually following the appropriate hashtag, whether it's PitMad, AVPit, whatever it is. And regular people are not allowed to like your pitch. It's going to happen anyway, especially if you have a lot of followers, because not everybody knows the rules of these things. In fact, I think most of my followers don't, because my followers on Twitter are mostly my friends, many of which are not writers. But the goal here is that if an agent or an editor likes your tweet, like hearts your tweet, that means that they want you to send them a query for the manuscript that you've pitched. And that's a pitch contest. I feel like I like somewhat botched that job of describing it. But that's basically what it is. You get to, you come up with a pitch that's a tweet long and you post it on a certain day with certain hashtags. And the agents who are following that hashtag, who are interested in getting this, will like you if they like your pitch, I guess. Usually people who want to support the pitch but are not agents or editors, they can do things like retweet the pitch or they can quote tweet the pitch. Different pitch contests have different rules. So like sometimes you can't like a pitch if you're an editor, but you could quote tweet or retweet the pitch if you're an editor, and that tells the person that you're interested. But if you're an agent, you could heart the pitch. There are rules. Each one has its own rules. You got to go to the website or wherever and figure out what those rules are. The last 2 or 3 things that I want to talk about, I want to talk about ISBNs and Boca. And the only reason I really want to talk about this, and one more thing is called a vanity press, is because earlier this year, I encountered a situation. Oh man, I gotta take a break and have some water. Okay. Okay. I think I have a voice again. Twitter pitches, what a soulless process, Nikki says. Yes, I kind of I want to try it and I'm excited to try it, mostly because why not try it? But for the most part, a lot of people don't like them, don't like Twitter pitch contests. Some people do. Usually, the people who like them are the people who get likes, and the people who don't like them are the people who, nobody ever sees their pitch. And I think that the Twitter pitch thing is actually kind of clever, because if you are an author with a social media following, then and like a social media following of people who actually care about you and care to engage with you, and engage with your work as a writer, then that means a lot of people, whether or not they're actually agents and they should be watching, a lot of people are going to quote tweet or retweet or comment on your pitch. And if your pitch gets a lot of attention, usually because you may have like a decent amount of followers, um, then it's more likely to show up on the radar of an agent. And so that algorithm, right, that situation works in your favor. And it means that that agents and editors get to see those best ones, or those ones with the most followers, etc., first. And some agents like that. Some agents want you to have a strong or engaged social media following, um, if they're going to take you on, right? If they're going to represent you, particularly if you're writing nonfiction. But I've heard people who write nonfiction say that they would like their, potential authors to have good social media presence. Um, but yeah, I think that it can go two ways, right? Like it can either go really well for you, it could go really badly, and there are different ways to approach it. I want to try it because I just kind of think it'll be fun. And if I have a pitch that works well, even if no agents or editors like come across my pitch and like it, because both has to happen, right? Both they need to come across your pitch and they need to decide they like it. But even if that doesn't happen, it is an opportunity for me to see how many people who do follow me or engage with me are interested in my work and the kind of work that I'm writing, and kind of move forward from there. So the last thing, yes, was ISBNs and Boca and vanity presses. So the reason I want to talk about these two things is because earlier this year I encountered a situation where someone claimed to be purchasing ISBNs on behalf of other people and registering those ISBNs to those other people. So let me try to explain that in a way that makes a little bit more sense. First of all, an ISBN is an international standard book number. You have an ISBN for every version of a book. So a soft copy print version of a book will have one ISBN. A hard copy print version of a book will have another ISBN. And an ebook copy of that book will have yet another ISBN. And I want to say that that might actually be even different between like types of ebooks, but I don't know for certain if that's true. It might just be one. I don't know. But the ISBN is important because it's a way to very specifically identify your book. And you can, now particularly if you're self-published, you're going to be interested in this, but you can purchase your own ISBN numbers to use on your own books. If you are in the US and you are a US person, you would do that through Boca. If you're in Trinidad or another Caribbean country, I think the way that you get it is through your national library. So I know in Trinidad you go to NALIS. I'm not sure about the other Caribbean countries, but I believe it's also their libraries. Um, but Boca is the body in the US that distributes ISBNs. Now, when you purchase an ISBN from Boca, I believe this is true for Nalis and the other folks as well, but I know that this is true for Boca because it says so on their website. If you purchase an ISBN number from Boca, that ISBN number is registered to you and to your account with Boca, and that cannot be changed. Okay? If you buy anything, any ISBN numbers through Boca on your account, it's registered to you. It's very important that you know that, because here we go with like schmagents and vanity presses and publishers that aren't real publishers and things like that. Um, they lie to you. They lie. And this is the problem I encountered, where even though Boca clearly states that if you purchase an ISBN with Boca, that ISBN belongs to you. It's not going to be registered to anybody else. It's registered to you forever, for life. This person was collecting money from others, claiming to register ISBN numbers to them. But that's not how it works. It's not registered to them. It's registered to the person who spent the money on it, which Boca thinks is that other person, right? So that's why I wanted to bring that up, because you should always you should know these things before you give anybody money, and you should do your research before any dollars pass, right? So if anybody says, hey, I'm going to buy an ISBN for you and have it registered to you through Boca, that's BS. That's BS. Because unless they create an account with your name and address and make that purchase through that account, it ain't going to be registered to you and it will never be. Cool. ISBNs in Boca. Done. Vanity presses. So another like shout out to Mel from the G Squad Discord server who mentioned that she asked if there was a publisher version of a schmagent, a schmublisher. The only thing I could think of was like bad vanity presses. So a vanity press is a publisher that you pay them to publish your book. Um, in my opinion, it's not quite the same as self-publishing because usually you still have the same kind of publisher's contract with that vanity press, in that they will still take a certain like a percentage of your sales and stuff. And vanity presses are supposed to do marketing for you, but not all of them actually do that marketing. And so basically, there is a huge risk of you paying them and then your book goes nowhere. And if it does go somewhere, you are the person who puts all the money into the marketing and you get all of that done. But then this publisher, because they are the people with the rights to your book, um, they still get a percentage of whatever you make on that book. Yeah. Yikes. So look out for that. That's a thing. Um, it's also like not the best way to explain it. There are more details that I can go into, but I am tired, y'all. I can't believe it's been 2 hours. I can't believe I've been doing this for 2 hours. Whew. I apologize if that hurt anybody ears. I do actually still have things on this list, but I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna take a pen name and brand. That's gonna go over to the next time I do this. I'm probably not gonna do this next week because wow. I did also want to talk a bit about NaNoWriMo today. That is not happening. Maybe I'll talk about NaNoWriMo next week. I'm also going to reserve all of my usual updates for you guys, though to be honest, I don't really have much of an update. I've got some stuff written there on my whiteboard for the whip for Project Obia, but I'll talk about that more next week when hopefully I have even more news to give you. I think that that's it. I think that we are done. I feel like this was a marathon. This was a marathon. Yikes. Wow. Incredible. Whew. Okay. Uh, I'm going to give you guys a minute. If there are any more questions or anything if there's something that you want to know about that I didn't mention today, tell me. Like now is a good time to drop that in the chat or to message me, since I know most of you actually do have my like can actually message me directly. Yeah, Candy, this was packed. This was packed. I feel like I've never done something this informative on this channel. I mean, I know I've never done something that attempted to be this informative at all on this channel. Send me a note of some kind so that I know what I need to talk about. So phrases like inciting incident, I need to talk about the next time. Phrases like I need to talk about pen names and brand next time. I should definitely talk about gosh, there was something else, but I wasn't taking notes because I was so busy trying to just like push through this list. I guess at some point I will watch this back on like 2 or 3x speed and try to see what I missed, that I need to come back and go over things like protagonist, main characters, love interests, those things. I mean, some of them, again, just kind of like genre and stuff. They're sort of basic terms that most people already know, but I know that somewhere out there is someone who doesn't know it. So, thank you, folks, for sticking with me all 2 hours. Wow, 2 whole hours. this is probably, this is the longest stream that I've done. I hope that it was worth it. I hope that somewhere in here I said something that is useful to you. If you are watching this from the future, I really I really hope that you learned something and that this is useful to you in some way. Um yes, and we should continue this conversation about people of color versus white people writing people of color. And voice stuff and whose voice is on the shelf and whose voice isn't. Why isn't Brendan taking notes for me? That's a very good question. I mean, I didn't ask him to. Yikes. Thank you, Kbat, for joining. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you both so much because Kbat, I know you aren't always able to make it, but I know Nikki has been here every single day at this time for the last 9 weeks, as well as Candy and Brendan mostly. So everybody else who's normally here. Thank you guys so much. It means a lot to me that you keep coming back to this, even though you like don't necessarily write, and you're really just here to support me and give me some kind of motivation to keep writing and to keep working on my manuscript. And I appreciate that so much. You have no idea. Um, and I think that's it. I think that's it. I'm going to end the broadcast now. If you still have any questions, or if there's some term or terminology or phrase or something that you want more information on, or that I can do the next time I do this, or probably the time after that, maybe. I don't know if I want to do this more than once a month. Maybe I'll wait till next month. But yeah, but I will do it, right? Just send me the list of terms and I will do more of those. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. Nikki says we will be OG someday. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Bye.